on Facebook and YouTube. All of my beautiful Mecca people, welcome, welcome. I am Shaylin Scott, the founder of Book Mecca, the online Black bookstore and literary resource for all things Black lit. If you are looking for a variety of Black authors, classics, or new authors, you can find them all through our Instagram page, our Facebook, everywhere where Book Mecca is. We try our best to amplify the voices of Black authors around the globe. So today we have a special guest. This is our breakthrough series, and once a month we have an author that is breaking ground when it comes to the literary world and breaking through barriers when it comes to writing. So we are excited to have a very special guest, award-winning author Cadwell Turnbull. And I will give you a little brief introduction of him, and then we will get started on our interview. And everyone here, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. If you have, we'll make sure to have all of his information shared with you so you can follow him and find out about his latest work because it is phenomenal and you definitely should read it. If you have not read, this is book number 2. If you have not read his first book, The Lesson, you should get that. And then get this book, No Gods, No Monsters. So be sure to check it out. So without further ado, our author is Cadwell Turnbull. He's the author of The Lesson. He's a graduate from the North Carolina State University's creative writing in fiction and English. He has a master's and in linguistics. Turnbull is also a graduate of Clarion West from 2016. His short fiction has appeared in The Verge, Lightspeed, Nightmare, and Asimov's science fiction, and a number of anthologies, including the Dystopia Triptych and the 12 Entanglements. His nightmare story, Loneliness is in Your Blood, was selected for the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy of 2018, and his Lightspeed story, Jump, was selected for the year's Best Science Fiction and Fantasy of 2019. And he was featured on LeVar Burton Reads. I know y'all know who that is. LeVar Burton Reads, for sure. His novel, The Lesson, was the winner of the 2020 Newcomb Institute Literary Award in the debut category, and The Lesson was shortlisted for the VCU Cabell Award and longlisted for the Massachusetts Book Award. He grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands and currently lives in Raleigh, where he teaches creative writing at North Carolina State University. So without further ado, let me welcome Cadwell. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to have you on. And I know that all of the Book Mecca family and all of our attendees that are watching are excited to hear about your latest work. So, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about your first book that you wrote, your debut novel, The Lesson. Now, for those who haven't read it, could you give us a little synopsis on what that one was about?
Oh, wow. I haven't done that in a minute. Yeah, The Lesson is a first contact novel, science fiction, set in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It takes place after a race of aliens called the Ina arrive in the Virgin Islands, and it follows 3 families as they adjust to this new alien presence, and it also gives a snapshot of the community and how it changes after the aliens arrive.
Okay. Now, with that being your debut novel and your most recent novel, when did this No Gods, No Monsters come out? When did this debut?
Yeah, this came out on September 7th, so it's this month. It's been an
Okay.
interesting month so far.
All right, guys. So it just started, just came out. This is what it looks like if you don't know. No Gods, No Monsters. Get the book. Be sure to get the book. So, what the synopsis for this book says: one October morning, Lena gets the news that her brother was shot and killed by Boston cops. But what looks like a case of police brutality soon reveals something much stranger, that monsters are real, and they want everyone to know it. So, as creatures from myth and legend come out the shadows, seeking safety through visibility, their emergence sets off a chain of seemingly unrelated events, and members of a local werewolf pack are threatened into silence. A professor follows a missing friend's trail of breadcrumbs to a mysterious secret society, and a young boy with unique abilities seeks refuge in a pro monster organization with secrets of its own. Meanwhile, more people start disappearing, suicides and hate crimes increase, and protests erupt globally. both for and against the monsters. And at the center is a mystery no one thinks to ask. Why now? And what has frightened the monsters out of the dark? Now, that's a great synopsis right there. That's definitely one. It intrigued me from the moment it started. When you bring in monsters anywhere, you go, oh, okay. So, next question is, will this be a movie? Or is that in the thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully, maybe. We'll see. The lesson is currently, in development at AMC.
Oh,
And so,
awesome.
yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. So fingers crossed on that, and then fingers crossed on this.
That's great. Well, I will definitely look forward to seeing that for sure. Well, one of the questions that I always like to ask the authors is, what are your literary inspirations? And in science fiction and fantasy novels are not necessarily novels that I'm familiar with. I try and read like a
Mhm.
variety of different types of books, but I'm just not familiar with as many authors, and especially authors of color that write in science fiction and fantasy. So, who were some of your inspirations in writing?
Got it. Yeah, a big inspiration for me is Ursula K. Le Guin. I started
Ooh,
reading her in college, in undergrad, and I think the first book I read was *The Lot of Heaven*, and then I read *The Dispossessed*, and *The Dispossessed* remains my favorite book. Octavia Butler is also a big one. Um, George Orwell is also a big one. Well, specifically 1984, I read that in high
hmm,
school, and it had like a big impact on me. N.K. Jemisin is another one.
okay.
Um, just recently, Martha Wells. Um, who else? Let me think. Ted Chiang is also a huge influence as well.
Okay, lots to add to the TBR list, folks. Lots to add there. Now, I heard that you have been compared to the likes of Octavia Butler and Ursula Gwynn. How do you feel about that? That's some strong
I,
shoulders there.
right. Yeah. No, I personally don't think that's accurate, but I do admit that, they are huge influences on me, and the things that I'm trying to do in my work are things that they do in their work. In a lot of
Hmm.
ways, I think better, but hopefully, um, I I feel, if someone's reading my work, they'll see some glimpses of those writers as influences.
Yeah. So you talked about the writers that have influenced your writing. What was the inspiration for this story in particular? Because there seems to be a parallel between what's really going on in the world right now with a
Hmm.
bit of
Hmm.
fantasy kind of layered on top of it too. So, what inspired you to write
Right.
this novel?
So, I mean, I always liked urban fantasy, and before I read any urban fantasy, in book form, I watched a lot of urban fantasy TV. Like one of
Okay,
my favorite TV shows is Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and its
classic.
spin-off Angel. Also really love Charmed, and I used to watch reruns of Charmed in the mornings, but when I was getting ready for school, you would come on, I think it came on TNT early in the morning, and so I would
Yeah.
watch that show. And I also was a huge fan of movies like Underworld and the
Okay.
sequels, and so because I like the genre, um, I recently started reading novels, in the same genre with my wife, and
Hmm.
we got into a few series that we really liked. One of them is Soulwood by Fate Hunter.
Mm.
Patricia Briggs is also a writer that we read a lot. Lona Andrews, we've read parts of her Kate Daniels series. And so, because I've been reading that and I've been thinking a lot about the genre, it seemed strange to me that I hadn't written more in a genre. I think I have two short stories that would fall somewhere in that range. And so
Hmm.
I decided that I would, play around in urban fantasy. And then once I made that decision, all of these other things started coming up about like how to tie that into the world that we live
Yeah.
in, and how to do some other things with the genre, how to bring in some big ideas and some politics and that sort of thing.
Well, you've done a great job with that for sure. Anytime you can mix werewolves and police brutality together, that's some skill for sure. So I see behind you there that you have a whole bookshelf of books.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone that is watching knows I'm always trying to look on people's books to see what's behind
Right.
them at the moment. So, what are you reading right now?
Um, well, I mean, nothing on the shelf. And I was talking to someone today about, and I don't know if it's like this for you, but when I look at my shelves, it makes me feel really guilty. There's a
Really?
lot of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on the shelf that I haven't read. I definitely can point to ones that are favorites, but there's like I can, go through a number of titles and be like, oh, I'm supposed to read that. I know I
It's
really want to
coming.
read that book. Yeah,
It's
it's
coming.
coming.
It's coming. That's how you
Um,
do it.
right. But what I've been reading recently, let's see, I've been reading the Murderbot series recently, that's Martha
Mm.
Wells. And also I just I don't I know I didn't read the last book, but I've been reading the Rakshara series. That's also Martha Wells. Um, just finished reading The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel.
Oh,
It's
I've heard good things
literary.
about that.
Yeah, there's a little bit, maybe a little bit of spec. I'm not sure. And what else have I been reading? And I've been reading some Naomi Novik recently, specifically Spinning Silver. Is a thing I'm reading
Okay.
right now.
I'm always interested in what authors are reading because it's funny because sometimes the authors, even though they write in a certain genre, they read completely in a different
Hmm.
way. And it's always just interesting to find that out.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I read a lot of spec, and I do read a lot of literary as well, and I read a lot of short stories.
awesome, great. Do
Mhm.
you write a lot of short stories as well?
Yeah, I think I would say I'm fairly regularly working on some kind of short story. Sometimes it takes longer than other times.
Hmm.
Last year was last year was good. Like I wrote maybe 4 short stories, but this year has been kind of and it's almost up. I haven't
Oh,
finished a short story this year.
hey, you still got time. We still got a whole nother quarter left to go before the end of the year.
Right.
You're good. You're good. Now,
Right.
as a professor in creative writing, have do you assign your books as for the students to read or anything
Oh
like that?
no.
No,
No,
suggest.
that seems real strange to me. I imagine myself if I was in those shoes and someone assigned their work to me, I would feel like I mean I could read
Yeah.
that and still love it, but I think that it's kind of I don't know, self-indulgent to subject your students. They have no choice but to be there and so you
Uh-huh.
make them read your book. No.
For all the students that are going through your classes on creative writing and they know that you're a writer and you're killing it, what advice or what are key things that you want them to take out of the classes if they're aspiring to be a writer like you as well?
Wow. I mean, I suppose and I don't know if this works out for every writer, but it's definitely something that I've used in my own career. I just kind of, go where I'm interested,
Mm,
and so write what interests you and what gets you excited and don't worry about whether or not it crosses genres, you
mm-hmm.
know, um, do what feels good and then work it out on the other end is
Yeah.
what I would recommend. And then I also think that, having a good writing practice, something that's achievable, not
Mhm.
something that's going to burn you out. So, my goal, is pretty modest. I try to do at least 250 words a day. Try
Wow.
to do it in the morning, and if I do more, that's great, And I usually end up doing more. But you would want to create a practice where you can cheat up instead of cheating down,
Mhm.
and B, reading a lot in reading writers that you really enjoy, and also reading things that you find challenging,
Hmm.
to develop your craft.
Those are some really good tips. Especially there's a lot of followers on Book Mecca that are writers themselves or
Hmm.
that are aspiring writers, and they're always interested in the craft of writing and how to get started. What's a good cadence of making sure that you're getting your work done? How do you know when the work is done if you've been
Right.
writing forever? I had an author on the series a while back, Jeffrey Colvin. It took him 20 years to write his debut novel, but he said, you know,
That
it.
sounds that's real. It's real.
It's
It took
real.
me 7 years to finish the lesson. And
Really?
some of that time was fallow. Like I wasn't really, I was avoiding it because there's certain parts of the book that I thought was really challenging and it gave me anxiety. And then I was doing a
Mhm.
lot of research. And
Mm,
so, and there's a thing that you can do where research is good and valuable. Um, but sometimes you can use research to kind of like compensate for the fact that like there's like you don't feel confident about a certain part of
yeah,
a story that you're trying to tell. And so I definitely like fell into some research holes that I had to claw my way out of to finish the book.
I bet. Speaking of research, in your current novel, No God, No Monsters, what type of research do you do on that? Is it more like the myths or the conspiracies that are out there, or are you looking? What were you digging into to kind of get the base?
Hmm. Yeah, so the monster stuff, I mostly just kind of again went where it interested me. Like if I felt excited about a particular kind of monster, or if I imagined one that I thought was really cool, I would just go there. Um, I brought in a lot of Caribbean folklore, but
Mm,
I kind of took creative liberties with it. I remixed it, so to speak.
okay,
Um, and there's a lot of big ideas in the book. There's some stuff about bees and using bees to think about society. And I talked to a bee scientist. Um,
real.
yeah, yeah. And there was I talked to someone, actually the same person, about wood carving, and that makes it into the book. I just talked to a lot of people about things that were interesting and tried to incorporate it. And there's some secret society stuff going on in there, and
Mhm.
I just read. I just kind of just dipped my feet in wherever and pulled in things, bits and pieces of things that I thought were really interesting.
That's awesome. I could see where you could get lost in all the research because there's so
Hmm.
much
Hmm.
to dig through. Just the secret society by itself, that's a whole book by itself. But
Right.
that's that's really interesting that you're into all of that. Have you always had a desire to be a writer, or was there something that spurred that interest in you?
Um, I think I always did. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a scientist. That
Mm,
was the thing I would say. And I think part of the reason why I thought I was going to do that was because the world seemed really strange to me and I was curious about it. And I felt like scientists matched that kind of like interest in how the world works. But once in middle school around then, I started considering writing as a potential future, and it kind of stuck. That was what stayed with me through high school, through undergrad, through graduate school.
wow. In middle school, those
Hmm.
formative years, it's always cool to see the children kind of gravitate towards something and stick with it. I don't
Right.
think I did that in middle school. I know I did.
I wrote a
I didn't do
paper.
that.
I wrote an essay about a book. We were reading the Diary of Anne Frank, um, and I read the book, and I think it was like the final weekend before it was due, and I wrote an essay, and my English teacher, um, basically said, "This is really good. You should consider writing as a career path." And it
Mm,
hadn't occurred to me until then, and then I was like, "Huh," and I started,
okay.
writing more.
What's that English teacher's name? Let's shout him out. Who was it?
Mrs. Jones.
Mr. Jones. Okay, hey, Mr. Jones. Hey, how you doing? Just did something great, which makes me think too of I want to say it was this month and last month there were a few memes going around on the internet about if you can remember the first time you saw your first male black teacher and when was that? And I was digging through my mind trying to think for myself personally, when was that? And no one came to mind outside of gym. That was it. It was sports, gym, that's it. But seeing everyone's comments of whatever it was, whatever that influence was, it was college or high school or that, it made me think of you now as a professor. Probably seeing you
Mm,
in that role is powerful in itself. And I can just imagine, the pathways you're probably setting off. a whole slew of writers just by being in that space that you're in. So
Wow.
just kudos to you just for being that face for sure.
I hope so. I hope so. It was, I think it was one of the reasons why I decided to do it. I felt like I wanted to be a part of a community and help build a community, and of diverse writers doing
Hmm.
really interesting stuff and weird stuff, things that um, they would be, otherwise afraid to do because they think
Mm, yeah.
it's not serious enough. And I try to encourage students to, you know, do it, have fun, and take it seriously.
Yeah, that's good. It's keep it up, keep it up. Make more writers, the more the better for sure. Now, with this being your second release book, did you have any um, hesitation or pressure that the second book should be just as amazing as the first book? Because the first book got a whole slew of, I mean, accolades, and people saying that this is the next Octavia Butler, the next great. And then your second book comes out. Did you feel that same kind of pressure? Like, second album has to drop. Let me think about it.
Hmm. I'm trying to think what my honest answer to this is. So when the lesson came out, when I was working on the lesson, I had very modest expectations. I had went through an MFA, and
Hmm.
I had the opportunity, the privilege to meet a lot of different writers. We would have, like, reading series where a writer would come in, do readings, and then answer questions. And one of the professors, he would host get-togethers, and I would meet other writers through that. And that experience kind of gave me a better perspective of what writing and being, a professional writer would be like, what
Yeah,
the career is actually like. That it's challenging, and you can write a book and it can be well received, but sometimes it takes a while
true.
for you to build a career. And so when I was working on a lesson, my thought was that it was going to be like a good starting point. Like, I wasn't expecting the response it got. And
Mm,
so throughout the whole thing, I was just surprised and excited about it,
okay.
and nervous too. Because, on the flip side, when that starts happening, you're like, oh, well, what's going to happen when I try to do this again? And
Yeah.
so there was that nervousness. And, I was nervous throughout writing No Gods, No Monsters. And I also um, was nervous because I knew I was going to be trying a lot of different stuff. Like, I was going to be taking risks with this book.
Hmm.
Um, And so that made me nervous as well. But I also was really excited. Like, I was like, well, the lesson did well. If I'm going to try to take these risks, this is the time to do it, because, you know, who knows if I will get the opportunity to do that later. And so I
Wow.
just kind of like took a leap, and I was like, I'm going to just write the craziest book,
There you
the,
go.
the book that I really want to write. And so I did,
It's good.
or
I can
tried.
tell that you're happy with what you came out with. I can tell. I can definitely tell. So if
I'm
this
excited
is
about it. Yeah.
that's good, good. Definitely be excited with this being one of three books, or how many more in this convergence saga do we have to look forward to? This is the book.
Yeah, it's a trilogy. Yeah, it's three books. And the way that I conceive of it, I try to make the ending to this book, pretty satisfying. There's a lot of,
Mhm.
like, open questions for sure. But I think about it as this really big, long, you know, ambitious story told in three parts.
Okay. So, what do your fans think, or what kind of feedback have you gotten from your fans about the book so far?
Oh, I'm gonna be honest about that too. Okay. So I think that in a lot of ways, I feel like the No Gods, No Monsters is in conversation with the lesson. Like, structurally, I
Mm.
think there's some similarities, and
Hmm.
there's also some other things that are deeper than that are similar. And there's there is some, well, I won't say anything more than that. But um I feel like, in my own mind, No Gods, No Monsters is it comes from the same kind of energy
Mm.
as the first book,
Okay.
but I don't know if that. I think that some people. I've talked to different people, and some people really love No Gods No Monsters, and then they like the lesson, or they really love the lesson, and they're like, "What is this? No
Hmm.
Gods No Monsters." Um, and then some people like them both. I think that um, if you read the lesson and you focus on certain aspects of the lesson, you might be unprepared for certain aspects of No Gods No Monsters.
Yeah.
Um, Even though I think that both of them are thematically very similar.
So perhaps you're getting two sets of fans now, two different types of
Mm,
fan bases, which is good. So now they can really
I
be
hope so.
invested. Yeah. So
Right.
you have a full following of a collective of different types of readers that are
Hmm.
just looking forward to whatever crazy thing comes out of your head, just seeing how it comes, which is so cool that you have all of these characters or that are in the book. Are some of them sort of based on reality, or do you how are you pulling the character development? How do you go about?
Yeah. The lesson was definitely, I mean, all the characters are themselves, but they also have parts of me. I put a little bit of me in
Hmm.
every character. And then they're also like drawing from people that I know, um, or composites of people that I know. And then they're also just new things that are just uniquely themselves. So it's a mix of, there's always a bit of me, there's always a bit of, you know, drawing from people. And then
Yeah.
there's always a bit of, newness, new something. And I try to lean on the new while being influenced by the other two.
Okay. Okay. Now, about kind of the newness and the nuances in your book, what something that really caught my eye was the look of the book itself, the cover art. If you guys can see that, it's really a beautiful book.
Catherine English designed it. She also designed the lesson, and
Really.
she's incredible. Yeah, yeah. And we talked about it. We talked about both books when she
So,
designed it.
so what were the thoughts behind the images that are on the books?
Yeah. So with this book, it was there's a character in the book that has she's a witch and she has magic tattoos.
Hmm.
And so I described some of the magic tattoos that were on her body and what they might do. And she used that to draw on some of the images on the cover. So there's a fish, there's a tattoo on her body that she uses to kind of steal memories, and it's a fish. Um, there's a snake, there's an infinity symbol, um, and then there's this cat. It's a tiger, but
Y'all can't see it that good on here, but I'm trying to show it to
yeah,
you.
on the
It's
bottom by my name, there's a tiger, and that is it might be a little bit of a spoiler for future books. And then there's like a carving knife that's one of my characters does wood carving, and so I
okay.
yeah, there's a knife on there as well.
So Easter eggs in the book. Hold on to the book.
Mhm.
Little things you didn't even know. I love that. One of the things I saw in the book that I really enjoyed was these pages right here that are black, almost like transitions. That's what made me
Mhm.
think it was really cinematic when you're reading the book because it almost like fades to black or
Mhm.
frees your mind a little bit to come back and think about the last chapter that you just read and try and make it make sense and then go to the next chapter for
Right.
sure. What were your thoughts behind that? Was that just for aesthetic or was there a purpose to it?
Well, the lesson is structured similarly, where there's sections that are, I would call them like episodes,
Mm,
where where it kind of moves the story forward, but it's focused on a particular character.
okay.
And this follows a similar structure where there's each section is focused on a particular character and things that are thematically relevant to that character while also trying to push the story forward. So there's bits of it that are um, a part of the larger narrative while also, telling a smaller narrative story centered around a person.
Okay.
um, when I was imagining the structure of it, I was thinking, well, episodes of a TV show. I'm a TV, I
Yeah.
love TV, but also an album. Like an album
Mm,
forms like a cohesive unit, but each part, each track is its own thing, and
Yeah.
put together, you get a whole experience.
Okay. That makes sense. I get it. I get it. I like it. I like that part of it. Now,
Appreciate
you had you mentioned that this is one of three,
it.
one of a trilogy that'll come. Have you already finished the trilogy, or are you in the process of finishing the trilogy? And if you're in the
No.
process,
Hmm.
one of the things that comes up often when I'm talking to writers and even those that have an interest in writing is, what do you do when you have that writer's block? And what have you done to kind of overcome it? You have the vision of what you want it to be, but it's taking too long to get out there, or you're just stuck. Is there some tips or tricks that you use to get over that block or that hump?
Yeah, I mean, this has been like a, interesting transitional year. I mean, for everybody, there's been a
Yeah.
lot going on, over the last couple of years. But I just started a teaching job and did a move and, was,
Oh, wow.
developing this first book, doing the editorial for this book, and then, touring for the book and that sort of thing. So it's been kind of a slowdown. I've been working on a second book. Um, but what I do, and I wish I remembered this every time I start a new project. I kind of forget, and then I have
Hmm.
to remind myself as it goes on. I start with like being very meticulous and trying to like figure out every part of it at once, like in a straight line,
Mm.
um, and outline the whole thing. And that's, I think some of that is because I'm nervous about it. It's to help, you know, you know, soothe my insecurity about whether
Yeah.
or not I think I can actually write this thing. But then eventually, and this has happened with the lesson, and it happened with No Gods as well. Um, I get really practical, and
Mm.
I stop worrying about mapping everything out at once, and I just kind of go where I can see, and
Mm.
that helps me with block. So like
Okay.
if I can visualize a part that's really vivid to me, I start there, and then I just keep going to the parts that I can see, and then I start making the connections between those parts as I go.
Envisioning and connecting. I like that.
Hmm.
I like that.
Hmm.
Y'all hear that? Envision and write it down, map it out as much as you can. That's good tips, good little gems of knowledge. A lot of the things throughout your book, you can tell you put a lot of hard work and effort into it, and you blend, like we mentioned, fantasy and social justice and just being rights, not even just human rights, being rights, all together. And you've paired research all through your work as well. Have you ever thought of pairing your books with um, public speaking or some sort of initiative? Because it seems as if it would just be a good fit.
Hmm. I
And the only reason I say that is, the only reason I say that is you have those that are, really um, dead set on statistics and how the world is in a certain way,
Mhm.
but getting them outside of their comfort zone and thinking that it's okay to observe something that's abnormal. It's okay to be around something that's a little different because it's a parallel of what's currently happening right now. So I just a way to soften it. It's just throwing that out there. Feel free.
Right. I've done a few, like, it's, I suppose it's activism, but I do like collaborative storytelling.
Mm,
And I work occasionally with like activist groups and stuff like that. And so
I could see
that's something. I'm a bit of an introvert, so like, public speaking is kind of intimidating to me, do
really.
I, yeah, yeah. I think I could manage it, but I think that what I really get excited about is working with people that are thinking about a certain thing and trying to figure out ways to, put that into a story and
Yeah,
collaborate with them on doing it. So I've done that a few times.
that's great. Now, I know that you're a professor. Have you worked with any youth groups as well on creative writing, or um, getting them involved in trying to even start writing or the thought of becoming a writer?
Not yet. It's something that I would like to do, and it's something I would like to do back home. You know, I grew up in the Virgin Islands, and
Yeah.
you know, it's definitely one of those things that I'm like, I feel like I won't be happy until I do something like that, in the community. So
Now, growing up
yeah,
in the
hopefully.
Virgin Islands, what were your influences like there? I noticed you said you put a lot of the Caribbean folklore within the book. Were you trying to also, I've heard of some authors kind of putting their fictitious towns resembling the towns they were in wherever they grew up or something like that? Do you try and feed a little bit of that into your work?
Yeah. So okay, so this book has a version of the Virgin Islands, and the lesson also. But I have written like utopian fiction inspired by Ursula Le Guin that's set on like parallel worlds where
Hmm.
um and where there are islands that are similar to my home islands, but they're utopian. There's a
Mm,
short story that I wrote, When the Rains Come Back, that was published in Asimov Science Fiction, that
okay.
is like that. I think the islands are Grand Prince and then Little Princess, and then I think the third one is called Middle Island. It doesn't make sense, but there's they're definitely based on the three U.S. Virgin Islands. They're just like imagining them in some parallel world where they're also a bit utopian.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Well, another question I always like to ask our authors are when you're writing your book and you are in the zone and it takes up a lot of your time, like you mentioned, 250 words, and you taking out this time. I'm sure the family around you are seeing you devote all this time. What does your family think about your work as well, or have they read your work? What do they think about you even being a writer?
Oh, okay. So are you asking me about like my so it's me and my wife. We have no kids.
Okay.
Are you asking me about my sister, my brother, my
All
mom?
of it. All
Okay,
of
all of it.
it.
My mom is very, very supportive, and she was always supportive. I think that it's interesting. So I'll call her up and I'll tell her that, such and such has happened. I'm like, Mom, the book was reviewed by NPR. And she may or may not care about NPR,
Yeah.
but she's excited in a way she's always been excited. You know what I mean? And so like
Yeah.
I'll come to her with like, Mom, I did something. It's serious, but she's always been excited. So it's the
Oh,
same
I love that.
kind of excitement. Um, and then my sister has read the lesson, and I actually need to send her this book. So thank
Yeah,
you
it
for
says to you
reminding
sent
me.
to get.
Yeah, I need to
Oh,
send it back home.
and that is
Um,
recorded.
yep.
You're
And so
getting
yes,
it. You're
she was
getting the
telling
book.
me, and I was talking to her while my aunt was in the room, and my aunt was like, "If you send her a book and you don't send me a book, I'm gonna be mad at you. I'm not gonna talk to you." And so I
There you
have to send
go.
my aunt a book as well.
Send them
And my
all the book.
brother, my brother also, reads my stuff.
I'm glad your family is really supportive of your work. That's
Mhm.
beautiful. That's really beautiful. Do you have any other writers in your family?
I don't think so. No, I
No.
mean not any immediate, not any immediate family members. No one I can point to.
Okay.
Um, I'm sure I'm wrong about this though. I'm sure that there are other family members, maybe some cousins that write.
All right. Well, they say writing is, well, this is what I've heard, that writing is it's a piece of your family history that just continues on. So typically there's not one writer, there's a whole slew of writers. You just may not know that they've been writing, or they may have never been published, but internally they are a writer. They're just putting stuff out there. So you
Yeah, I'm
may
pretty
be
sure.
one
Yeah,
of many in your own family. And kind of speaking of family too,
we all are artists. I'll say that. Like
there
my
we go.
my brother is an artist, my sister's an artist, my mom is an
Oh
artist.
wow.
So it's not always manifested in writing though.
Yeah.
Like my brother is a graphic designer, for example.
Graphic design. This could turn into a comic book.
We've talked about it a few times. Yeah,
Yes.
we've talked about doing, collaborating on something before. Yeah,
That would be really cool.
it would
Have
be.
even if you had, I know I'm just randomly talking here, but even if you had the the novel paired with the graphic novel, that would be awesome. Awesome, awesome. A good little double dose, but I digress. So for um throughout the book, there's a little bit of history that you bring in, or a mention of history and trauma kind of throughout the theme of the book. There's a quote in there that says that trauma's an open door, and we all have to make amends to the people we let in. It kind of made me think that writing is this form of somewhat therapy, or writing is a form of getting these thoughts and feelings out, because you're kind of parallel with some of the things that are going on in the news in the world today. Is this sort of a way of kind of pushing out some of those thoughts and feelings about what's currently going on?
Yeah, always. Yeah, I mean, a bit of the motivation for the book is trying to imagine how we can, build a better world. You know what I
Mm,
mean? And this is part of the lesson. It's part of No Gods, No Monsters. The series is all of these characters, finding their way towards each other and trying to build something
yeah.
that, through solidarity, um, that can be protective, can be nourishing. It can also help them, actualize, as people, as beings.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's definitely a thing that goes into the work that I think a lot about, and it's the way that I try to puzzle it out through writing. And I also think that when I was in the MFA, yeah, it was during the last year of the MFA, I was struggling a bit because there was like a rash of officer involved shootings.
Mm,
And I feel like it happens in waves. Like we know we can point to a bunch of names
yeah.
um, of people that were lost this way, but it also feels like they come there'll be like a particular year where there's just a lot of them,
Hmm.
right? And that year I was online a lot. I was trying to talk to people, trying to figure out if this was something that could be, if people could be reasoned with about this and understand why this is a problem.
Yeah.
And I remember that it weighed pretty heavily on me. And when I was working on No Gods, No Monsters, it just happened to be during another wave.
Mm,
Like the pandemic was happening, but there were also all of these
yes.
protests that were happening in response to police violence again. And it was just at first, it seemed like a reasonable way that werewolves would come out, specifically werewolves that are from a marginalized background.
Hmm.
Um, but it became a part of the book and a part of me working through some of my own feelings and trying to figure out like how to expand the camera, because that's the thing that I find really frustrating about these events is that the conversation gets really, really small, really fast.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, people don't talk about like all of the things that lead up to those moments um,
Hmm.
on both sides, and all of the systemic things that, push, you know, Black and brown people into these situations, and all of the ways that society preps, police officers to see these people as threats. And um,
Yes. That's
all of that went into the book.
it exactly made me think of I think there was a news article that came out saying, at what point does a young child of color become a threat? At what age
Mhm.
do they grow into just by looking at them, they're naturally a threat? And it made me think of I don't want to tell the story in the book, but when you see someone from afar or something from afar that is not what it
Mm,
is it a threat, or should you wait a little bit to see what's actually going on?
mhm.
Yeah, it's you guys read the book. Get the book. What I've been telling you, just get the book for sure. Well, I know our time is coming to a close, so I definitely want to make sure that um, I ask this question to you. So, For the younger you, what advice would you give yourself as a young writer starting out? For all the things you know now, what would you tell younger you?
You have good questions. um, Let me see. Let me think. Huh. Yeah, I think that when I was a younger writer, I only thought about the writing part, you
Mm,
know? And I think, being an introvert, I think that, that part comes naturally to me, like sitting and thinking a lot, or going for walks and thinking, or going to the library and thinking, going to a coffee shop and thinking. So there's a lot of like internal work that you do as a writer, and but there's also that other side of the writing, which is like maintaining a career, and I wish I thought about that more when I was a younger writer, and I paid attention to the realities of trying to be a writer as a career, not just
yeah.
as art, and so that's one thing I probably might tell him, to like kind of like pay attention and think about that kind of stuff more, not in a way that's like overly like not a lot of pressure on it,
Hmm.
because I think that if you think about it too much, you develop, I think, unhealthy relationships to the work that you do as
Yeah.
well. But just to be prepared, and to because when writing the lesson and having the lesson come out, I was very excited about it, but I think that a big part of um, what it meant for it to come out in the world only occurred to me once it
Mhm.
was like getting published. I was like, oh well,
Wow.
now this is in conversation with my community. How's my community going to respond to it? They responded to it well.
Oh,
Um,
good.
right. But I had like so much anxiety. I would like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my gosh, I wrote about this. What's going to happen? And I feel this way about this book too. And I wish that I thought more about that. And I also wish that I thought more about how, having a public self, being a public person as well. That stuff has taken me longer to get used to, because
Hmm.
I'm like, I really didn't expect the lesson to like get the response it did. And then when it happened, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible, but also a lot. And
Yeah.
so, preparing young Cadwell to, it'll be, if it goes well, it'll be great, but it'll also be a lot. So you should probably prepare for it.
Well, that's good advice for younger you, for sure.
Mhm.
And I think you've settled in to your new space quite well. And
So,
you have a
yeah.
very unique name, so I'm sure that you will have a following even beyond your books, your movies, your graphic. I'm sure you will have followings, and who knows what the future holds, but I know it'll be bright for you for sure. So I'm excited for you. So I
I
do
hope
want to
so.
say, thank you so much for joining and taking the time for being with us. For everyone that's watching, if you want to learn more about Cadwell, go to his website. You can also find his social media information all on our page. I'll make sure you share that. If you missed today's live stream, if you missed it, you can always watch the replay on Book Mecca Blends on YouTube. You can always catch it on Facebook. It'll be on IGTV right after we wrap up here. And you can always continue to follow us and find out who will be next on our show. And I told everyone here we had a special surprise. So the special surprise is we have an upcoming hike and read event in Fort Worth. We are hiking a mile and a half in the mountains
Oh
in the
wow.
woods. We have a nice overlay over a lake where we'll stop and we'll read the book that you're currently reading or your favorite book, have a nice brunch and a 15-minute yoga session. But along with that, you get a mindfulness pack as a thank you, and you get a giveaway of this book.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
So we want to make sure.
Whoa.
I am so excited that this will be the giveaway, guys. So if you
Oh my
want to,
gosh.
No Gods, No
Wow.
Monsters is coming on a hike with us. It'll be our booking read. So we are
Thank you
so
so
excited.
much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for
That is that is wild to me. That's amazing. Thank you.
you way in Fort Worth. You didn't even know it. Fort Worth, Texas.
Oh wow.
Well, thank you again. I always like to close with a quote from an author, and today I decided to just close with something I read in your book that it just kept catching me, and it made me think that every story carries a bit of the past, kind of with it. And one
Hmm.
of your sentences says, "The universe and the history of everything are on repeat, a vinyl record spinning forever." And I thought that was so profound because that is truly what we're in. When they say the times just keep repeating itself and things come back around, we truly are. So live our lives freely in the best way that we can and continue writing. We look forward to the next one. So thank you again, Cadwell.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you.
This was a great conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, Book Mecca folks. Good night. Have a blessed one.